Christopher Hitchens once said that no fierce will admit as to what will destroy their faith. I've been called out on this several times in my Reels runs, because I'll admit, at that time, I wasn't aware of what could destroy my faith. However, a couple of small videos have appeared on my YouTube feed that made bold statements which could have brought my faith crashing down like a literal ton of metaphorical bricks. The channel, called Jeff, was run by a former Christian, presumably of the same name. In the first video, entitled Christianity is Evil Lies, he makes the claim that Rome made up Jesus to help pacify Jews into cooperating with the Roman Empire. Having literally just done a video on the crucifixion of Christ, and all, where I explain the supposed anti-Semitic doctrine in the Gospels, this may well have left me vulnerable to similar attacks, since influencing church doctrine would have been reasonable to expect in the early church, and even fiddling with the translation of certain verses, or even the verses themselves in copying. And the Romans wouldn't have been above such deceit. After looking at an earlier video, not finding any research references to back up this claim, I found something that contradicts this idea in seemingly a more devastating way. In his video entitled Christianity is Fake, he mentions how the teachings of Philo of Alexandria appear to have an immense influence on the New Testament and the early Christian church, as it became the official religion of the Roman Empire. So, is my religion, my belief in Jesus Christ, and all the work I have done over the last year or so on this channel, based on a hoax by the Romans to block further rebellion by the Jews, only to later expand upon by Greek philosophy and distributed across the world? Is this the day that I'll change my YouTube channel from a Christian-centric study on experimental theology to one where I dismantle my own faith and join the atheist community of Austin from here in Scotland? Has this man, in less than 10 minutes, completely destroyed my faith in Jesus? This is a worrying thought, but I invite you to come along with me, no matter what the answer. My first port of call was to examine the broader teachings of Philo of Alexandria. He was indeed a Hellenic Jew, living in what was then the capital of Egypt. The Hellenistic influence had been around for, well, long before the Roman Empire came knocking in Judea, and was believed to be the influence behind the Pharisees in Judea. After looking at the references to the Logos of God, one could say that it's a contemporary parallel with Jesus of Nazareth. Although Philo never mentioned the man himself, he did speak scathingly of Pontius Pilate, specifically mentioning that he could be bribed and was prone to executing people without trial. While far from proving the existence of Jesus, it does lend credence as to why he was never mentioned by Philo's pen. A Jewish preacher not being a threat to the empire, being hounded by his own kind and executed without trial, wouldn't have been worthy to pass across to anyone outside the immediate region. Any reference to a Messiah, Son of God, or someone claiming to be the King of the Jews would be lost in a similar wave of missives within Egypt alone, since Herod Agrippa was seen as the King of the Jews by the local population, and enough Hellenistic influence was in Judea that anything related to the Son of God performing miracles could have been written off as references to the Logos. So that, on its own, doesn't destabilise Christianity by any stretch of the imagination. The next thing to consider is Jeff's claims about the early New Testament manuscripts only being found in Egypt. True, the New Testament as we know it wasn't compiled and canonised until the Council of Rome in the late 4th century, but fragments were discovered as early as 200 AD, at the latest, in Egypt, since this was round the time of Bishop Demetrius of Alexandria, and well within the time of the Christian persecution by the Roman Empire, the chances of this being Alexandrian in origin aren't as high as one might think, because Koine Greek wasn't just a local language in Alexandria, it was widespread throughout the empire at the time, just as common as Latin. As for Hellenistic influence on Roman Christianity, the ecumenical councils brought together bishops from across the Christian world, and in the case of the First Council of Nicaea, which was instigated by Emperor Constantine, this was focused on the Eastern Empire, which would have included the Alexandrians. So, influences by Platonic philosophy would be expected, and in fact, if absent, would have been thoroughly confusing. With that being considered, let's address the Roman suppression hypothesis. This isn't unique, by the way, to Jeff, since I found an article in Vice where someone suggested the self-same thing. However, none of them seem to address one major issue. Why were the Christians persecuted if they were merely carriers of the idea that was meant to get the Jews under heel? Surely they would have been welcomed if that was the case, and integrated more thoroughly into the empire, long before Constantine made the persecution illegal in 313 AD. Instead, we've got Pliny the Younger writing to Emperor Trajan in 112 AD, asking what to do with the Christians he has in his custody, and being told to follow the laws which punish them. This makes me wonder, when would they have introduced the idea of a Jewish Messiah preaching submission rather than rebellion? Whilst there's no extra biblical writings mentioning Jesus and his apostles, Josephus has been said to write about Christ, although the antiquities of the Jews have been called into question by the historians. However, in the article in Vice, Joe Atwill mentions supposed parallels between the events of the Jewish war in Judea and the events of the Gospels, specifically Jesus saying to his disciples, "Follow me, and you'll be fishers of men," compared with the Roman general who had his men follow him without fear to sink Jewish ships, and then told them to fish them out with their spears. This sounds interesting to the least, and even allowing for confusion, it does have some parallels. However, the events described during the Jewish war would have been at the earliest 66 AD. Josephus didn't publish his works until 70 AD, and long before then, Christians were mentioned in Rome, even being blamed by Emperor Nero for the Great Fire of Rome in 64 AD. Whilst I can see the Romans using Jesus as a means of calming the Jews, and this not only would this have backfired on them at the time, this would have had to have been before the Jews revolted in 66 AD. but given Josephus's notes on the war, this doesn't seem likely. This, I think, is the crux of the issue. I know there are those that say Tacitus, the great Roman historian of the time, never mentioned Jesus in any of his works, and that is true. However, the fact that Christians were mentioned as a potential perpetrator of the Great Fire of Rome implies they were well established in the capital of the empire. Later Roman historians mention Emperor Tiberius trying to legitimise Christianity within the Roman Senate not long after the crucifixion of Jesus, only for that to backfire and be declared illegal. However, due to the strong likelihood of bias, I can't take this as evidence. Tacitus, however, was well known for his disdain towards Christians and Jews. Add that to his strong dislike of bribery of any sort, and his accounts of Christians in Rome before the Jewish revolt can be taken as accurate. To really push this home, Sunontus mentions Christians as early as 54 AD, and maybe even as early as 41 AD. Was both those references in Suetonius and indeed Tacitus use the term Christos, as in Christians and not Christians. Given the similarity and odds are a lack of distinction, I don't see this as a reason to say Christians weren't in Rome before the Jewish revolt. Was neither mentioned Jesus directly in any way. This implies the Church's version of events is far more likely than the suggestion that he was made up. Finally, there's one thing we have to consider. Like with all conspiracy theories, the chances of that being let slip by someone is way too high. Even allowing for the burning of Alexandria and the destruction of so much Roman literature during the Holy Roman Empire, Tacitus is likely to have mentioned it, and knowing his disdain for both religions, this is incredibly likely. Whilst there are some Christian historians at the time who could have some agenda, and we had to allow, of course, for translation errors, as well as deliberate tampering, like with Josephus referencing Jesus in the Antiquities of the Jews. If that was the case, we would actually get far more references to Jesus than we do at the moment, even including the Apocrypha. We may not have all the Roman literature which could indeed prove it either way, including the complete works of Tacitus, and then maybe things left, and there may well be things left to discover. But just because we haven't found it yet doesn't mean it doesn't exist, or vice versa. That argument never works for Christianity, and I see no reason why it will work for this atheistic argument. You need to set your standards and keep them balanced. We have what we have. As far as I can see, this doesn't disprove Jesus in the slightest. There's some further digging on Jeff's channel, and a recent video from 2024 gave the reasons he said Jesus was fake, which again put the date of the likely time the conspiracy would have had to begin as later than the documented dates that Christians were in Rome. Plus, he doesn't address the documented persecution of Christians throughout the empire, from Nero until the rise of Constantine. It sounds as though his beliefs are based on just as loose a premise as he thinks Christianity is, which doesn't lend his position much credence. We also need to remember that Romans tended to deal with revolts in more aggressive ways, as proven by Pontius Pilate against the Samaritans. Even allowing for individualism, the provinces weren't governed by politically astute people who can make such an idea work, let alone gain enough traction. It would be mentioned in the capital of the empire by two notable historians. So after an extensive amount of research to ascertain if any of this could be true, I'm saying nothing that can support any of Jeff's claims. Ultimately, if such evidence to prove this conspiracy theory appears, like, say, a contemporary historian outlining it was a hoax, or just outing it flatly, or even evidence that Tacitus was mistaken, that Christians were in Rome before the Jewish revolt, I would likely have to accept that he was right, and despite my best efforts, would give him the benefit of the doubt. But as far as I can tell, nothing Jeff says can be taken as solid fact. His understanding of the text and the basic Christian law is questionable, even missing the Jesus prophecy in Isaiah 53. And naturally makes me ask what denomination he was raised in, and what was he taught regarding the study of the scriptures. I'll make a full review of his channel maybe in the coming year, when I get around to doing that. I've got a few more things on my plate that I want to get sorted before I start that series again. Despite this, I honestly like the claims that Jeff made, and they made me look into all manner of historical areas I would never have looked at before. Whilst I was genuinely worried he had found a thing that would smash my faith into smithereens and expose the lies of the church over the centuries, it has instead bolstered my faith and given me a more rational reason to believe in Jesus, and through him, God. The Logos is merely an extra point in my history of ideas, which not only explains the lack of Jesus of Nazareth references by Philo, but also raises a number of more interesting questions regarding deeper theological debates that have raged in the church across the centuries. So strange as it may sound, I think I should thank Jeff for his videos, which gave me such an insight into the hoaxes surrounding my religion. When I get time, I'll once more do my review of channel series, but until then, subscribe and share with others who might be interested in this subject matter, especially if they're in the position of doubting and just need someone to give them either a nudge in the right direction or something more to think about. The more you know, the more empowered you are. So thanks for watching. Stay safe. And God be with you, my friends.